Hello everyone. Today's topic is John Milton's famous sonnet on his blindness. First, a look at the poet. His dates are 1608 to 1674. Hailed as a poet, intellect, civil servant, Protestant, he leaned to his Puritan values till the end, and many of his works have to do with Christian analogies and allegories. He was born in Bread Street, London, into a middle-class family, and he was proficient in various languages, in particular English, Latin, Greek, and Italian. He could both speak as well as write in these languages. Now, something remarkable about him is that by the age of 44, he started losing his sight, and he turned completely blind at the age of 54. But despite this, which to the normal person would look as a huge impediment, he continued to write and in fact produced most of his well-known works at the latter age after he turned completely blind. As examples, we have his epic poem Paradise Lost, written in 1667, and Samson Agonistes, which is a tragedy written as an accompaniment to Paradise Regained, which was a kind of sequel to Paradise Lost, and this was published in 1671. Now, it is generally accepted that On His Blindness was written after Milton turned completely blind, but the date varies. Some say it's between 1651 to 1655, but here we are following what our text says, that it was written in 1655. Now let's just skim through the entire poem without going into the details, because what I want all of us to observe here is the style of writing. Firstly, it's easy to detect the rhyme scheme. Now, when you're looking at the rhyme scheme, we know that we always count the last words. Okay, for example, spent is matched with bent and present and prevent. So we get the rhyme scheme A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, E, C, D, E. So the octave has A, B, B, A, B, B, A, and the sestet, which is divided into tercets, that is 3 lines each, we get C, D, E and C, D, E. Now all of us know that as far as the sonnet is concerned, we have an expression of conflict at the start of the sonnet, but towards the end, the speaker seems to have resolved his problem. So likewise, this is also a sonnet, but it's a particular sonnet, that is, it is a Petrarchan sonnet, after the Italian writer Petrarch, who wrote sonnets divided into the octave and a sestet. The octave would often state the problem, and the sestet would come to a resolution of the conflict or the problem. Now, this poem is written in iambic pentameter, that is, an iamb has 2 syllables. The first syllable will be unstressed and the second syllable will be stressed. Let's look at the first line. When I consider how my light is spent. So you get a set of 5 iambs. So 5 iambs in a line makes up an iambic pentameter. Moving on, let's look at the text in more detail. He starts, when I consider how my light is spent. Okay. Let's look at the word light. Light is metaphorical in that, um, there's a sense of being lost in the darkness. On the other hand, it's also a literal translation of the blindness, okay, that has come over Milton's life. Continuing, ere half my days in this dark world and wide. So not only is the world dark, but it is wide. We can only imagine, how a blind person would feel, or the kind of perspective he has of the world. Here, Milton is ruing the fact that ere, that is before half his days has been spent in this world, his light is already gone. Okay? And that one talent which is death to hide. Now, the word talent also has metaphorical meaning, but in the early days, if we look at the parable of the talents, which is allegorized with Milton's own situation, you find this in Matthew 25:14 to 30. This talent in the Bible was a measure of gold. So it was like a gold coin where, a master had gone somewhere and he had given various talents to his servants. To one he had given one, to another he had given two, to another he had given five. So to those that were given five or two talents, they had doubled it by the time the master returned. But to the one whom he had given one talent, he had hidden it, under the earth. And his excuse was that he was terrified of not having any talent to show when the master returns. So the master, in anger, casts out the servant into the darkness, okay, calling him wicked. So in that line, Milton also puts himself in the position of the servant who had not done anything with his talent. Now, in the case of Milton, the talent is for writing, and writing poetry in particular. And he assumes that God would not be happy with him if he would not be able to use his talent. But on the other hand, this talent seems useless because he is now blind. Yeah? Let me read it again. And that one talent, which is death to hide, lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker. So we see a sense of determination here when he says, despite the fact that I was blind, my soul had more determination to serve our Lord and Maker and present my true account, lest he, returning, chide. That means despite the blindness, he had a sense of urgency to, serve God, lest when God returns, he would find that Milton has not used any of his talent. Now, usually the speaker of a poem has no name, but this is an autobiographical poem. That's why we use Milton as a direct reference. To chide means to scold, okay? So this may have been, a question that he would put before God, had, God approached him. Doth God exact day labor, light denied? When a person wants to labor in the day, definitely there will be daylight. Okay, that's the literal meaning. But in the case of Milton, his light has been denied because of his blindness. So does God still expect service out of him? And he adds, I fondly ask. Now, fond here means foolish, okay? It does not mean liking or affinity, okay? So here we have, a kind of quick answer, but patience to prevent. Now, as far as this octave is concerned, we have what is called, the conflict, okay, which is presented. And through the idea of Milton being in the place of the servant, we get an allegorical reference, okay, to the parable. Another thing here is, but patience to prevent. This is an incomplete line. So this is called an enjambment, okay? That is the continuation of a sentence beyond the end of a line, which somewhat disrupts the meaning of the sentence because it's an incomplete sentence, okay? So this is slightly unique, although it's a sonnet. We have an enjambment here, so we will continue, but patience to prevent that murmur soon replies. Now, going back here, look at the word patience. It's capitalized, okay? That means, it is being personified, okay? Personification is a poetic device, okay? And where, feelings or non-animate objects are given lifelike qualities. So before he can murmur or before he can mumble and complain, patience comes to his rescue and tells him, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Look at this word, his. That means the talents or the gifts have been given by God himself, so he does not need the gifts that he himself has given away. Okay? But who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. Now, a yoke is a kind of wooden structure that is used over, cattle or bullocks to maneuver their movements. But here, the yoke of God is mild. That means it's something gentle. So it's almost an oxymoronic statement here when he says, who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. So whatever you have been given in life, whether it's some problem, whether there's some trouble, whatever you have been given becomes your yoke. But the yoke given by God is not for us to be anxious, but it's a mild yoke. Okay? So how does he resolve the idea of his not being able to serve in his present state? His state is kingly. That means God is a king. We know that. So a king has thousands at his bidding. Okay, they speed and post over land and ocean without rest. It's not expressly mentioned, but it's a reference to, a king having so many people at his disposal. In this case, God has thousands and thousands of angels, okay, roaming all over the atmosphere. The resolution is fully met by this last sentence. They also serve who only stand and wait. That means the people, even if they're not actively serving, if they're standing and waiting, that means there's a sense of faithfulness to God, okay, which is a kind of paradox, because when you're standing, then you're not serving. But in the biblical sense, if you remain faithful to God, you are also one who stands and waits, and thus you are in service to God. Now, the themes covered are the sense of guilt over not using one's talent, and also the sense of patience as a virtue, having a sense of faithfulness. We also have conflict and resolution, as in any other sonnet, where the speaker has an inner conflict of not being able to use his talent, but according to the resolution, as long as he remains faithful to God, God will see that, he gets his portion. Okay, God will acknowledge him. and God as light, that is very